All right, I think we'll get started today, but welcome everyone and thank you for joining us for our webinar. This webinar is titled The Next Generation of Cyber Warriors, Preparing Gen Z for the Digital Frontier. My name is Marina Mito and I'm the Student and Young Professional Liaison for the Institute of Strategic Risk Management in Australia and New Zealand, and today I'll be your facilitator. First off, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are conducting this webinar, the Indigenous peoples of Australia, and pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. This webinar came about from a blog post that listed Gen Z as the biggest cyber threat to an organization. And today we wanted to explore the alternative in seeing Gen Z as an opportunity to harness and empower. As the world becomes increasingly digitized, the need for skilled cybersecurity professionals has never been greater. The next generation of cyber warriors, the Gen Z, play a critical role in protecting our digital frontier. So in this webinar, we will explore the challenges and opportunities facing Gen Z in the field of cybersecurity, as well as discuss strategies for preparing them for successful careers in this dynamic and rapidly evolving field. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our wonderful panelists joining us today. We have Leanne Close, Dave Cohen, and Janita Zhang. Leanne is a Chief Executive of Government and Strategy at the Risk to Solution Group, and she was a Deputy Commissioner of the Australian Federal Police with over 33 years of policing and law enforcement experience. She is a member of various boards and committees, including the Australian Volunteers International, ACT Gambling and Racing Commission Board, ACT Sentence Administration Board, and the Victoria Police Audit and Risk Committee. It is a huge background that Leanne has, and we are very lucky to have her join us today. And she is also a member of the Victorian Government External Advisory Panel on Countering Violent Extremism. Next, we have Dave, and Dave is the General Manager at the Cybertech Institute of Australia, and he is also the Chair of the Institute of Strategic Risk Management's first Cyber Special Interest Group, which provides a platform for the exchange of expertise, knowledge, and experience globally. As the General Manager of the CTIA, Dave has taken this business from a startup to a respected and reputable brand in the cyber education space, highlighting a strong movement towards women in cyber and STEM. Last but not least, we have Janita, and Janita serves as the Group Marketing and Technology Manager at the Risk to Solution Group. In this role, Janita is responsible for leading the company's group-wide communications with responsibilities encompassing technology and cybersecurity support. This includes tech onboarding and maintaining cybersecurity protocols to protect the company's data and assets across multiple business units. She also sits on the University of Queensland's Young Alumni Advisory Board, and she leads the Young Professional Portfolio. So I think you can tell by this intro that we have quite the group joining us today, and we're very glad to have you join us as well. So welcome Leanne, Dave, and Janita. Without further ado, I think we'll get right into the questions, and we'd like to begin with Dave. So Dave, welcome. And first, can you try and explain the misconceptions surrounding Gen Z and cybersecurity? It's a big question, but go for it.
Thanks, Marina, and thanks to everyone for being here this afternoon. It's a great privilege to certainly share the stage with everyone that's on the panel today. Yes, Marina, as you alluded to in the beginning about how this webinar came about. So there was an article that came out that highlighted Gen Zs, or let's just maybe qualify what we're referring to as a Gen Z. So a Gen Z, or a Zoomer, as we call them, or which is essentially someone that was born sort of mid-1990s to mid-2020s, 2010s. And why a Gen Z is essentially termed an organization or society's greatest threat. Now, we had a look at this, and I look at this, and I thought to myself, this is all wrong. This isn't the case at all. We have got a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of talent and a wealth of expertise that we're potentially setting up for our future, and not to be a vulnerability and not to be a liability. So the question is, why did this article, what was the motivation behind this article? You know, we're thinking Gen Zs or Zoomers are essentially fast learners. They have grown up in a technologically sound environment, so they're way more technologically advanced than most. They understand technology and they understand the processes of technology. However, there is one spanner in the works, and the one spanner in the works that we find is that instant gratification and this environment in which we're currently operating in, where information is at our fingertips, has stunted the world to look outside of the box. So it's created a sort of quite a narrow approach to dealing with certain tasks and dealing with certain situations. As we know that the world doesn't operate in a silo, it is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And in order for us to address these challenges of what we call VUCA, it's important to look outside the box and look at external factors besides the ones that are specifically within our remit. So with this in mind, we've now got an incredible opportunity to take a Gen Z and mold a Gen Z who's a very, very malleable type of individual with a very malleable type of psyche, and mold, train, and develop that sort of generation into something that can really stand up and be a powerful force in the future going forward, which I believe is a fantastic opportunity.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dave. And I am interested in hearing from Leanne as well. And what we are looking for is what you think are the key challenges and opportunities for engaging young people in cybersecurity to begin with.
Thanks, Marina. I think, building on what Dave said, thinking about the different generational issues that I think arose from this article, which really piqued our interest to think about. There's so many positives about this. Gen Z, like all of our current young people in the community, they're digital natives. They grow up, with iPads, iPhones, all of the tech at their fingertips. So I think there's a bit of an assumption about their abilities in terms of cybersecurity that people will make. So some people think that they're absolutely across it all and really clever at that. I think I'm probably going to show my age a little bit here, but when I joined the police, we didn't have computers in the office. We were using typewriters and other things. As that's changed and progressed, 30 years on, we're still becoming good at learning about what does digital mean to our workforces, what does it mean for educators, what does it mean and how we manage our cybersecurity. And we've seen so many examples of that recently. And there's also a big element around psychology here. So I think in some of the challenges for engaging youth in our cybersecurity space, we need to have good teachers in schools who really understand that space, who can encourage them, who are good role models. We also need to think about then how we're translating that into the workplace. I think in a lot of cybersecurity roles that we engage different businesses in, we're seeing a much older demographic responsible for it. So people need to be open to listening to younger generations and their experience and expertise and bring them in, but also, get a level of understanding of their abilities and their knowledge around cybersecurity specifically, which is what we're talking about today.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think that something that you and Dave both mentioned was the psyche behind sort of different generations and how it impacts the workplace. And I think this is very interesting because there's so many studies coming out on this right now, and it certainly is a huge topic of conversation among my generation, which is how do you integrate into a workplace that has different approaches to things, and I would love to explore that more with you both later. Janita, I'd like to move on to you because you have a massive role. Obviously, you work across the entire R2S business to try and handle communications as well as cybersecurity. So from your opinion, how do the unique skills and knowledge of Gen Z make them well suited to handle cybersecurity? And how can small business owners leverage the digital skills and knowledge of Gen Z to protect their businesses from cyber threats? Now, that's quite a large question. So what we'll do is I'll first separate it into the unique skills and knowledge of Gen Z that makes them well suited to handle cybersecurity.
Thanks, Marina. And this question, as you said, is quite big and combines a lot of actually what Dave and Leanne have already said. It is a common misconception that just because someone is good with technology, that then they can handle a company's, cybersecurity. While it is true that Gen Z is generally more tech savvy than previous generations, it is important to note that cybersecurity is a highly specialized field that requires a specific knowledge and skills. And it is not just about being good with technology, but also understanding the intricacies of, network, data security, threat intelligence, instant response, and compliance. Cybersecurity is a constantly evolving field that requires continuous learning and updating of knowledge. So, Gen Zs in this field will need to stay up to date with the latest technologies, threats and trends in the field to be able to effectively protect a company's assets. So, with that being said, as for small business owners, they can definitely benefit from the digital skills and knowledge of Gen Zs. Like any employee, they need sort of training and mentorship to opportunities for them to, develop their skills. But certainly, business owners can benefit from their fresh perspectives and ideas when it comes to developing and, implementing cybersecurity strategies. And I think as well, Gen Z, has been termed by many as the I generation. They've been born and raised in the digital age, so they are naturally tech savvy. They're comfortable with technology. They're great problem solvers, which makes them perfect for sort of handling cybersecurity with the right experience and the right training. I think I kind of answered sort of both those questions there.
Thank you. It does. And I'd just like to move back and throw a question just from that to Leanne and Dave. So we sort of talked a little bit about how the sort of natural skills of someone who has been raised in that generation is helpful towards cybersecurity, and with the right mentoring and with the right leadership, it sort of helps you perhaps go on that path towards cybersecurity without, of course, the natural assumptions that you are all across it. But I was quite curious, in your opinions, what do you think it is within the psyche of Gen Z that is quite helpful towards cybersecurity from almost like the whole of person psychological perspective? And just to explain what the whole of person model is, it's looking at a person on all their sort of fronts, their social life and their work life, and how it all comes into play in a career. So perhaps, Leanne, if I could start with you.
So I think really it's for any person in any organisation to be encouraged to get involved in discussions and conversations about how they can contribute to technology development, innovation in their company. It's what Marina said in relation to, Janita said in relation to education and training, having to stay up to date and understand what's going on, being really curious about those sorts of aspects. The psychology of it, I think, is such a huge topic though, Marina. We could, it was really interesting to, it is interesting to look at some of the issues where people are scammed or, releasing information or trusting in the information that's coming to them through emails and other things. That doesn't affect older generations or young, it affects everybody. And that's really around that psychological risk where people can be very clever to appeal to people's inner wishes and desires and understand how to try to engage people. And the other aspect for us that we've got to be thinking about in the future is the impact of AI as well, and how that affects the psychology of the way we do business. So there's fantastic opportunities in all of that for using people and their experiences to counter some of those things from a cybersecurity strategy, getting involved in those discussions to make sure that our cybersecurity policy is really strong in an organisation. But it's then how do we have those conversations? How do we set up processes where people can recognise things or question things that come into their organisation, into their emails or Teams or whatever applications they're using, and making sure that they stay cyber safe, they stay cyber aware and savvy, and they're contributing to the team's outcomes, they're contributing to their own development and growth, and then to the organisation's growth as well.
That's so interesting. Thank you, Leanne, because it almost sounds like we're talking about resilience and critical thinking skills and putting them together in the sort of field of cybersecurity, and that's great. And I'd like to throw a question over to Dave now about the role educational institutions play in developing the next generation of cybersecurity professionals if we're trying to cultivate that sort of strong mindset in cybersecurity and awareness.
So just to follow on from Leanne's point, she raised so many very valuable points there, you know, and you followed on from that. So we've got that ability for Gen Zs to operate in the. Gen Zs are extremely resilient individuals. I mean, just think about the troubles, the landscape in which a Gen Z has grown up in today. It's absolutely remarkable. What and I don't like to refer to them as them and us and them and us. We are all one. But just for the purposes of this webinar, to sort of, I don't like siloing either, but just for the purpose of context, because Gen Zs are such a unique generation, it's a phenomenal generation, and it's not a case of, you know, isolating or putting them, you know, excluding a Gen Z. It's just a case, it's a very interesting generation to be able to look at. So I definitely don't like this us and them. We're one. And that's definitely the way I see it, is that, you know, we're one generation together. But having said that, Gen Zs possess a very, very unique skill that they've had to develop very, very quickly, and to develop very, very early on, to become so resilient in such a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. I mean, we just look at the timing of things like the Ukraine war and things like COVID and things like 1 in 100-year floods happening twice in 5 years. These are all phenomenons that are having to be dealt with in this current generation, and the resilience required to be able to overcome those sorts of things. And I think that the world has overcome COVID in a very, very, very unique, successful way. And I think we've progressed far beyond what we would ever have set out to achieve as a nation, and as from a global perspective, than we would have. And I think a lot of that credit needs to go to this firecracker generation that sort of ignited this flame under complexity, compliance, and maybe a bit of sluggishness to a degree. So I just want to frame that. Now, Marina, to answer the question that you directly asked me, education needs to move with the times, and that sort of follows on what I was saying, is that, you know, the days of the preacher standing on a stage preaching are over. Learning has to be done in a very different way. Learning has to be done in sort of a gamification kind of way. And the Cybertech Institute of Australia released a blog this week in our latest newsletter about the importance of gamification and the importance of that as a method of learning, as opposed to death by PowerPoint. Hands-on technical skills and experience, practical application. We're living in a world where practical application far exceeds and far outweighs intellectual theoretical knowledge. Yes, there has to be a balance between the two, and yes, theoretical knowledge is critically important. However, having said that, we need to be more doers and less thinkers, because the doers are the ones that are going to get the jobs done. The doers are the ones that are going to actually affect the difference. The thinkers are the ones that help the doers get the job done. So we do need a balance of both, and it is important to have that mix of both. But we don't want to get caught up in this environment of too many thinkers. So depending on what your desired outcome is going to be. So do you want to go through the long-winded process of degrees and masters and PhDs in a field that requires doers, where you're caught up for such a long period of time learning and absorbing knowledge, and not really acquiring and adapting the skills to be able to apply that knowledge in the practical world, which is changing so rapidly? So that ability, and that sort of leads me on to my next point. Education institutions, or my educational institution, CTIA, for example, have given ourselves a self-imposed responsibility to do more than just educate, but rather equip individuals and rather equip students. And this is a plea and a challenge to all educational institutions out there to match or better and to join us in this plight of not going and doing things as we've done in years and generations gone by, but it's time to change. It's time to do things differently. It's time to equip students with much more than what they've come in for. So they've come in to learn cybersecurity skills and to gain cybersecurity skills. So it's incumbent on us as an educational institution to provide students with the necessary skills to be able to walk out of the program and then not have to go and get, sort of do intern jobs for a period of time until they develop the skills to actually start earning a living, but actually walk out of a program or walk out of a qualification with the skills ready to pick up arms and start their job from day one. Knowledge is fresh, skills are fresh, skills are sharp, and now you're able to go out and apply those knowledges and make a real difference to companies. But more so than that is, once I've got these skills, how do I apply them? What do I apply them with, and how do I apply them in a business environment? So you could be a young Zoomer, Gen Z, who's just done your Cert 4 in cybersecurity, for example, don't really have too much experience in the business world, don't really have too much experience in the corporate world. How does that integration happen? Is it the responsibility of the organization to sort of get you ready to integrate in the workplace environment? Or is it the incumbent on the educational institution to provide the individual with the skills to be able to take what they've learned in the program, the skills that they've learned in the program, and how do we apply them in the workplace to actually make a big difference?
Thank you, Dave. I almost hear a message of urgency from what you're saying about doers versus thinkers. And I'm quite interested in also asking a question next about how we cultivate the perspectives and needs of young people, perhaps within that realm as well, into organizations. But I hear a message of urgency that we need people on the ground now working within the cybersecurity area. I just want to say that I see a fantastic question in the Q&A panel. Please do continue to submit your questions and answers, and we'll get to them shortly. But Leanne, moving over to you, we're wanting to go into things that organizations can put in practice to empower young people in their organizations. So how can we ensure that the perspectives and needs of young people are taken into account in the development of cybersecurity policies and practices? And to add to that, how can a small business create a culture of cybersecurity within their organization?
Thank you. Probably the best example I can give is something from Risk to Solution Group that we've implemented for about the last 12 months or so. Whenever we have a new innovation in our group where we're bringing in a new business or some sort of major change to what we're doing in the organisation, we create a pod, and our pods are basically a group of people that volunteered to come together. They've got an interest in things, but we also make sure we balance the skill sets. And right now, in the last 12 months or so, we've had a cybersecurity pod for Risk to Solution Group, and that'll probably go on for another 12 months at least until we bed down everything. In the pod, our main objective there is to make sure that everything we do in Risk to Solution is in accordance with Australia's Essential 8 criteria for strong cybersecurity posture. And what we've done there is make sure we had a cross-section of our organisation to participate, to give ideas, to bring the work together, to understand and do a bit of a risk assessment, what's in place currently, where might we have gaps, putting forward business cases to the CEO in terms of what changes we need to make to strengthen our cybersecurity, and an education campaign for our own teams and staff as well. Once we bed that down and make sure that we're really satisfied that we're meeting the level of Essential 8 that we want to for our organisation, we'll then be able to just keep monitoring it. So the way that we're getting different generations involved is through the pod, making sure that we're listening to their issues, understanding that not everyone's going to be a cyber expert in Risk to Solution Group. So how do we make sure that the pod can translate the information of those changes really effectively to the whole rest of the organisation to make us all much stronger in the way that we undertake our business?
Fantastic. Thank you, Leanne. It sounds like creating a safe space for people to sort of share their ideas and views, no matter what age they are or what their background is, to sort of have a more rounded perspective. I think that's a great idea. Janita, we'd like to move to you and ask you, how can we empower young people to be responsible digital citizens and protect themselves and their communities from cyber threats? And how can we inspire and encourage more Gen Zs to pursue careers in cybersecurity? Oh, so if anyone in the audience has ideas about how we can encourage more Gen Z to encourage cybersecurity careers, pop them in the chat. Janita, over to you.
That would be great if people can pop in their suggestions, because there's nothing better than to actually hear from the generation. Marina, you're in that generation too, yourselves, as to your ideas and what your thoughts are around this matter. But I think Dave covered quite a bit of this, talking about the different sort of career pathways of like soft skills and hard skills, education and hands-on experience, tailoring education to the unique needs of Gen Z, providing them with engaging and interactive learning experiences that will help them understand the risks and the rewards of the online world, especially hands-on experiences, sort of providing opportunities for Gen Z to gain hands-on experience in cybersecurity, whether that's through internships, training programs, attending conferences and events. There's nothing more cool, also a little bit scary, than seeing live demonstrations of, how hackers hack. One of the ones I remember seeing a couple of years ago showed how online criminals were getting people's information through auto-completed fields. They would create websites for anything, as basic as a newsletter subscription, but hidden off screen are, form fields such as your first name, last name, mobile number, credit card information, your birth date, and if you selected your information and that you've saved for your autocomplete information, it then populated these hidden fields and submits this information to them. So it was bizarre seeing this sort of in real time. And, ever since then, I've been a bit much more careful when I use my autocomplete field information. So it's things like that get young people thinking and being more aware and gaining an interest in that. It's also on us to create a culture of security, sort of what Leanne was referring to, creating a culture of security in schools and communities and companies in which cybersecurity is seen as everyone's responsibility, in order to inspire and encourage more Gen Z to pursue careers in cybersecurity. We need to highlight the impact and importance of the field and showcasing the diversity of roles and career paths available in cybersecurity, helping them understand the different ways they could contribute to the field. It's also important to note that cybersecurity isn't just about technology. It also involves soft skills, as Dave was saying, such as critical thinking, problem solving, communication, which are skills that are highly valued and transferable to other fields.
Thank you, Janita, and such great points there. I'm just going to highlight a couple that we've heard so far, and that is what you were saying, designating responsibility to multiple people for a whole of organization sort of cyber approach. Leanne's point about sort of creating a safe space for all ages and all backgrounds to contribute towards a cyber policy. And Dave, what you were saying about education remaining cutting edge and designating a certain point between thinkers and doers and making sure that there's clear pathways for that kind of education. So Dave, going back to you, what are the current and future cybersecurity issues that we should be aware of and educate our youth on?
So mindful of our time, I'm going to keep it rather brief. So we need to understand that the landscape is ever evolving. The problem isn't that we're not educating. It's a case of that, are we educating with the right skills? So what, we're dealing with a situation where cybersecurity is the hot topic. Cybersecurity is the flavor of the month. So everyone's going out and getting a career in cybersecurity because the money's good, the outlook's good, and the prospects are good for a career in cybersecurity. But are we doing the right things about getting a career in cybersecurity? Are we making sure that we've checked the program that's going to give us the best opportunity at a career in cybersecurity? Not only going for the program that's the cheapest, that's the shortest, that fits into my schedule, and going to give me some kind of a credential at the end of it. I think it's important to ascertain what does the market want and what is going to give me the skills to be able to get to that place. So yes, self-paced study and a 40-hour program is easy. It's great. You can do it when you like. You can not do it when you don't like. You know, going back to, we're living in a very busy world where anomalies get thrown around all the time. Self-paced study seems to be the natural progression, but unfortunately, to gain knowledge, self-paced study is great, but to start a career, self-paced study isn't going to give you the skills that you're required to actually become a useful member of an organization, or even to be able to start your own business if you're looking at starting your own business. You know, knowledge is great, but a career in cybersecurity is a lot better. So cybersecurity is a journey of constant learning. It's a journey that's constantly evolving as we're developing skills to defend against cyber attacks. So attackers are always one step ahead of us, improving ways in which they can become more technologically advanced and better at what they're doing in terms of a career, in terms of penetrating and breaching and through various vectors. Now, it's important. I've had many conversations with a lot of people. What do you want to do with your career? I want to become a pen tester. I want to become an ethical hacker. I want to do this. I want to do that. That's great. And it's great to have those aspirations, but it's important to get a good foundation. It's important. And I use the analogy of becoming a doctor. You know, you can't just become a cardiologist because you're interested in the heart, or you can't just become a neurologist because you're interested in the brain. You have to become a GP first. You have to understand human anatomy in its whole, in its entirety, before you can become a cardiologist or before you can become a neurologist. Cybersecurity is very, very similar. You've got to have that fundamental baseline foundation of cybersecurity before you progress. There are no shortcuts. There's no such thing as a free lunch. There's no such thing as an easy ride. If you want a lucrative, successful career in cybersecurity, unfortunately, you've got to do the time, and there are no shortcuts to it. Just because it's a hot topic, just because everyone's talking about cybersecurity and the world is moving at a tremendous pace, things still have to be done in the right way, and things still have to be done in a way that's going to ensure that your progression through cybersecurity is good. So you get a baseline, you get a well-rounded understanding of cybersecurity in its entirety. You become a jack of all trades almost. And then if you want to become a master of one, not none, then you further your education in that particular space. If you want to become a pen tester or an ethical hacker or an incident responder, or maybe run a security operations, however you want to progress your career in cybersecurity, that will be up to you to progress. But you've got to have that fundamental knowledge. And by getting that fundamental knowledge doesn't mean going to university and studying for 3 years to get a degree. It could be something as simple as a certificate 4, which is 9 months, which you can do as a part-time program, but make sure you choose the right one in an educational institution that's going to give you the skills to be able for you to progress your career going forward.
Thank you, Dave. Good message about having a strong foundation before specializing there as a sort of trend in industry and cyber careers at the moment. Thank you. Leanne, I would like to ask, how can we even begin to measure the impact of youth participation in cybersecurity programs and initiatives as a way to make sure that organizations can benchmark these initiatives?
Thanks, Marina. That's a really big question about measurement. I know, Dave, you say this all the time. What does good look like? And you touched on it, Marina, earlier about, for an individual, what does good look like for that person? What are their training goals? How are they going to contribute to the goals of their organisation and their team? Then how does the whole team contribute to the organisational goals and outcomes? So we achieve what we measure, so we have to have good data, but what is it we really want to measure? What's going to be effective that makes things better for the organisation in terms of cybersecurity? Is it adding up numbers about how many times people have, how much cybersecurity issues we've had in a 12-month period where people may have released information inappropriately? It's sometimes difficult as well when we've got preventative measures where we're saying people are not hitting an inappropriate link. So it really comes down to, I think, those key things for the organisation. What is it we want to achieve? What does an individual want to achieve for themselves in their roles? And then we put appropriate measures in place that will get to those outcomes. It's really a huge topic on its own that you could talk about in terms of what are the right KPIs, how do we know we've been successful. So you have to look at some of those quantitative measures that are really meaningful, that do show that we're making a difference, and those qualitative ones as well that tend to focus more on prevention and outcomes we're achieving for the organisation. So it's probably not answered it fully enough, but it really comes down to what's the organisation wanting to achieve and the individuals themselves. That'll help us with those good measures.
Thank you, Leanne. That's great. Thank you very much. Just moving on, we might want to go in and begin to answer our audience Q&A. So I'd like to begin with a fantastic question from an anonymous user, but they ask, why does instant gratification only apply to Gen Z? Why is it not a vulnerability for other generations? So Dave, I might throw this one over to you.
That's a great question. Thanks, Marina. So I'm assuming that anonymous was referring to the comment that I made earlier. Now, it's not just a case of that it only applies to Gen Zs. It applies to all of us as we have progressed through our careers and as we have progressed through an evolution of a working environment. So we've also become accustomed to instant gratification, absolutely. So much so that I know of a factory, a large motor vehicle factory, that actually stopped their servers from delivering emails to staff after 5 o'clock in the evening because they were responding to emails after hours because they felt that it was important to get back. So that's how instant gratification has infiltrated our life. But we have a basis for comparison. We knew what it was like before internet, and we knew what it was like. Goodness, I'm sounding old. We knew what it was like before internet, and we knew what it was like before we had things like Google and search engines and things like that, where we couldn't just put type in a question and all of a sudden got an answer immediately. Sometimes we had to wait the next day for a response. We had to wait for a phone call. We had to do all of these sorts of things. So there is that sort of basis for comparison. Whereas a Gen Z has grown up, they have no basis for comparison. They've grown up in a world where information is at your fingertips 24/7, and it's created almost an impatient generation. It doesn't mean to say that it's all bad, because what that does is it drives productivity and it drives more doing as opposed to more thinking. So it's a good thing. It's a case of just harnessing it in a way that it drives productivity rather than creates a very one-dimensional approach.
Can I add something to that, Marina? I think touching on something that you said earlier, Dave, as well, generational comparisons are interesting, but at the end of the day, I feel that we're all just people and every person has their own wants and needs, and we're all experiencing the same history at the same time as we go through our experiences. It's just some people in different generations have got a lot more experience because of their age and the sorts of things they've done. So I think in terms of the question there, I agree. I think there's vulnerabilities or issues that could impact any organisation, any generation. I know when I was in the police, we saw a lot of older people who were being scammed for various things. One was an example of romance scams where people were lonely and reaching out through various apps and connecting with people and really believing the stories that they were being told, so much so that they were either defrauded of their money or became drug couriers, things like that, because of just their ability to connect with people online that they couldn't see in person or had no personal contact with. So I don't think it's totally a generational issue. I think that it's a human issue, and we just need to talk about productivity in organisations and what works for a particular organisation, have those conversations, but be open to the fact that technology is changing the way we do business, and everybody within organisations and in society need to keep pace and need to be having conversations about what does that mean for us and for our organisations.
Thank you so much, Leanne and Dave. I agree with all the important things that Dave and Leanne have sort of touched on. I would like to hand the mic over to our facilitator Marina, specifically noting your role as student and young professionals liaison with ISRM, as well as communications director for the Youth National Security Strategy during the Asia Pacific Week at ANU, and your role as co-editor of Fem Insights in Security. How can we create a more inclusive and diverse cybersecurity workforce by involving more young people from underrepresented groups?
Thanks so much for that question. And I guess the main thing that I'm hearing from the generation and what a lot of research is showing at the moment is that it's very much a values-led generation, and that is what can the organization sort of prove to younger people about how much they care about diversity targets or how inclusive the culture will be. It's about sort of feeling valued in your contribution and making sure that you know that there's opportunities there for you because people believe in you, and it will be a good environment for you to sort of foster your views in. And I also think part of that is potentially just inputting quotas in cybersecurity initiatives, making sure that you can see representation of genders and different groups within the cybersecurity space, so that you have allies within there to sort of reach out to and also know that it is possible and that it has been done before. I do want to say that being able to choose sort of a values-led company is obviously a very privileged thing to be able to do, and a very lucky thing to be able to do. But I do know that people are happier to take a step down in their career in order to go into a place that can retain them and stay with them throughout a longer period of time through having fantastic diversity and also gender initiatives as well in a lot of cases that I look into. And I think in that sort of way, we can involve more young people from underrepresented groups by sort of taking the whole of person approach and showing that from the foundational level, the organization will support you in your career and what you hope to do. But thank you very much, everyone, for letting me weigh in as well. I had a great time. And we are coming towards the end of the webinar today. Thank you again for joining us. But I do want to just point out a couple of points raised by our audience. And Suzanne said that part of the way that we can empower Gen Z to become part of cybersecurity careers is learn to speak with them, listen to them, and teach them from our experiences. And also learning how to be more emotionally resilient and having cyber skills within sort of wrapped up within emotional resilience. So thank you very much, Susan, for weighing in. To conclude today, I'd like to just go around to all of our panelists and ask for one sentence of what you hope the audience will take away from our discussion today. Leanne, I'd love to begin with you.
Thanks, Marina, and thank you for the questions as well for yourself and for everyone in the audience. So I guess the last thought I'd like to leave everyone with is there is so much opportunity out there right now for people who are interested in a career in tech and cybersecurity specifically. So speak to a lot of people, do your research, and understand what's going to work for you and where you want to head into the future. And what we've seen so much changing in the last little while is that there's not just one career for everybody that to stay in for the rest of their lives. There's plenty of opportunities to continue learning and growing and having a great time as you move throughout your career path.
Thank you, Leanne. Janita, now over to you.
I think while Gen Z are sort of naturally tech savvy and well suited for handling cybersecurity, it is highly a specialized field, as I said before, requires specific knowledge and skills. Although we shouldn't solely rely on sort of an entry-level employee to handle cybersecurity just because they are Gen Z. However, I do believe that they have an ingrained solid foundation of tech since birth to be really successfully fast in the field of cybersecurity.
Thank you so much. And Dave, final comment from you.
So, Leanne, not to disappoint you, I will finish off with this comment. What does good look like to you? What do you want to achieve? Where do you want to go? And what is your end goal? And once you've ascertained what is required to achieve your goal, work backwards and then decide what you need to do to get there. Whatever work needs to be put in, whatever you need to do. But cybersecurity is, people say to me, what do you do for a living? I tell them I save lives. And that's essentially what we do in cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is not a technical sport. Cybersecurity is not a sport based on a criminal activity. Cybersecurity can be anything. Cybersecurity is business, cybersecurity is development, cybersecurity is planning, cybersecurity is human-centric, cybersecurity is technical, cybersecurity essentially is people, process, and technology. So wherever you choose that you'd like to fit into that, understand what your good looks like, and then work backwards from there and decide, how do I get to where I want to be? And then set yourself up for that progressive journey.
Thank you so much, everyone. Mindful of time, thank you for sticking with us and for joining us today, and to all of our panelists for sharing your time and your thoughts. We hope you found the points in the panel today useful, and we also want to thank our sponsors, Rista Solution and the Cybertech Institute of Australia, for sponsoring our webinar today. To find out more information about them, please refer to the names on the slide below and feel free to give them a search. Thank you, and we hope to see you again at our next ISRM webinar.